So I want to introduce myself. I'm from New Zealand. I grew up in a university teacher family. I grew up in what was considered a good family. I grew up in a family where, of course, this was a family where they knew how to raise children. This was a family where good outcomes would be expected. And I grew up pained. I grew up a statistic. I grew up violated, my heart, my body, my mind. I grew up shamed. I grew up learning that I needed to struggle with life with some really sad coping strategies. This could not be. This could not be happening. So I grew up with tremendous secrets. I had a silent world of misery around me. Fortunately, I was going to say escaped. Fortunately, I left. All young New Zealanders leave New Zealand. You have to. And then eventually you go back. I didn't go back, but I did leave, and I came to this country at the time of the women's movement. And for those of you who remember, the most profound thing about the women's movement, there were many, many things. People a lot of times think about wearing pants, but the most profound part of the women's movement for me was that it was a time when women were sitting around and we were telling our stories. It was sharing what had happened. Here I was really believing that I was the only young girl this had happened to. I had no idea that there were all these young women who had now become adults who had similar stories to me. So as I sat and listened to the stories, I realized that I actually was not alone, that something really profound was happening during our childhoods. And so many of us were walking around with this hurt alive as adults. And then I remember sitting in a rocking chair. I can see myself in a pink robe holding my first son, my only son, and thinking, I am meant to love this child? With what? With what? I didn't know what it meant to love. I didn't know the sort of action of loving. I can still feel being terrified. And at that moment, with the community in which I was living, making this commitment that I was going to dare to shift the paradigm, and I was going to break the cycle for my children. I was going to parent them differently. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, and it was through our own storytelling, it was through joining together, it was through support, it was through breaking through cultural cultural messages that we had. It was breaking through shame, it was moving to vulnerability that we set out to raise our children differently. So that was my personal journey. I then have, think about my professional journey. 50 years, over 50 years, every day, giving, thinking, acting, first as a preschool teacher. Again, being in preschool environments, really? Do we really want to take voices away for children? Do we really want classroom management practices that leave children quiet and shamed, disconnected from this gorgeousness of their spark and their intelligence? Breaking out, saying, no, we can do this differently. I ran a teen program for many years with women whose class background very different from me, but here what were they longing for? They were longing exactly what I had longed for. They longed to raise their children well. They longed for respect. They longed for reparenting and to repair all the hurts that had happened to them. And then about 13 or 14 years ago, I decided, okay, I'm going to start an organization that's going to hold an uncompromising view of what a paradigm shift would look like. What would it really mean to dare to raise children differently? And then I begin to hear, and I know, we all know research. You know that word, research, you have to have research to back up anything you want to do. What do we know about attachment parenting, don't we? Many of you here probably did attachment parenting. We know about the importance of emotional intelligence. We know the importance of really the working with the brain, that 80% of the brain is wired in the first 5 years of life, and that the brain is a use-dependent, historical organ. Everything that is ever experienced by that child or said to that child is actually wired into the brain. We hear business people talking about what it is to work in a business world, don't we, through empathy and emotional intelligence. We hear all kinds of professions are now talking about mindfulness and what it is to have reflective practice. What about this institution of parenting? What would it be like? Instead of just knowing the research theoretically, we actually dared to change our practice. What would it be like to take the research and actually say, no longer are we going to punish and hurt our children by what? Bribes? Threats? No longer are we going to give consequences. No longer are we going to watch shows like Nanny, Super Nanny, Naughty Chairs, Shaming Mats, TV, popular TV show. Do you know how many people told me they were learning to parent from that show? No longer are we going to be able to go to Toys R Us and buy a timeout chair that has a timer on it. You know, and you sit the child on it, and when the child gets up, you set it 1 minute. When they get up, and they, you know, for 1 year old, buzzer, doesn't it sound like house arrest sort of thing? You know, no longer are we going to have this hollow addiction to praise. Good job. That doesn't come from any meaningful place of real interaction with children. No longer what about all these star charts and reward? Can you imagine if every time you ever did anything, oh good, I'll give him a star for that. I'll give my wife I'll make sure that I get a reward for that. This is the thing I honestly don't understand. I honestly don't understand from the deepest of my place in my gut. I don't understand why we don't treat children the way we wanted to be treated. So you're struggling in a relationship, maybe in an adult relationship, or maybe you're in La La Land and you're thinking about, we're going to have this perfect marriage, and you go to the bookstore to look for a book about how to love your partner well, how to have a really beautiful relationship. What's the first chapter you're going to look for in that book? I better look for how to discipline my partner. I better learn about how to effectively control them. I better learn how to use, time out. I better learn how to, maybe I just won't cook their favorite food for a week because that might teach them a lesson. Do you get my point here? But when we're parents, what do we so often do? We get into this place of not really trusting our hearts, of not trusting that we really can love our children with the deepest of intimacy. So we go and we get books on how to discipline our children, don't we? And you go to parenting classes and you just pray hopefully this class is going to teach me a technique I don't know. Because I've tried all the others and they're not working. Why can't we just give it all up? Why can't we say, yes, our children need us to be the parents. Our children need us to guide, to teach. Our children need us to help them learn how to problem solve. Our children need us to help them learn what to do with big feelings. But mostly, our children need us to be role models of how to love well, how to care, how to actually connect with their hearts, how to give them their voices, how to listen to them, and how to deeply understand and ultimately how to model for them what it is to become powerful adults who care about social change. What would it be like that my children, your children, our children, that every block had a safe haven, a safe house for them? What would it be like if in every community there was a storefront? Come, parents, come. This is a place to come with your vulnerability. This is a place to come and tell your story. This is a place that we're here to come together in support and nurturing. What would it be like to change our language? So whenever we hear children being put down, some of the ways people talk about children, that we spoke up. And we spoke up and we said, we're going to break that. We're not going to allow that language. We're going to change that language. That's not respectful. What if we all became allies and advocates for the biggest silent minority in the world is children? What if we hold our voices? What if we hold our voices and say, we will no longer participate in discussions where children lose their integrity? What about if we say, when we hear discussions of public policy, that we speak up for the rights of children? You getting my point? You know, there's 3 countries in the world that have not ever ratified the United Nations Convention for the Protection of Children's Rights. There's a movement to get the United States to be one of those countries. What if we all joined that movement? There's also an organization called Stop Hitting Children in the United States. What if we spoke up, signed those petitions? What if we dared to say, we're done, folks. We're done with the way we're raising children. Do you know what? The sense of complete joy we would receive from watching our children become adults who would lead a society with peace and justice. I think of the people, the Maasai tribe, when they greet each other. You know what their greeting is? Traditional warrior greeting is, the children are well. When safety prevails, the greeting is, the children are well. I long for the day when parents, non-parents, where we would greet each other and be able to say with the deepest of hearts, the children are well. Let's be allies and advocates for our children and reach that day. The children are well. Thank you.